We came to Canada in March of 2020.
पहुंच गए भाई पहुंच गए हैं बस उबर की वेट कर रहे हैं
And since then, we have bought two pre-construction houses, one in Calgary, one in Kitchener. But right now, I'm not very bullish on pre-construction. And we'll talk about in today's presentation why pre-construction is not probably a good idea in 2023. We'll also talk about watchouts if you're investing in pre-construction and when it probably could make sense. We'll talk about opportunity and adversity because there are some opportunities that pre-constructions will bring. And we'll talk about that in a bit of detail. And then we'll finally be talking about warnings for people who are closing pre-constructions in 2023 and what they need to do right now. So first, let's talk about why is it not a good idea. And the number one reason is that pre-constructions right now are priced for future. Let's give an example. So this is a really prestigious project. It was from Rycon in Mississauga. It was very close to square one. It's a 1+1 and the possession is 2025 and 2026. The purchase price is $695,000. This includes parking, this includes locker, this includes HST, this includes everything. Now let's talk about this particular property that you see on the screen. This particular property is a 1+1 in square one right next to square one mall. The possession obviously is now because it's a resale property. It's a 2019 build, so it's a pretty new build with really good finishes inside. The purchase price for this one, the person who bought was $580,000. The down payment is $116,000. Now what we are going to do is we are going to compare this one with the pre-construction. And what I mean when I say that pre-constructions right now are priced for future. Because we are closing it right now, the closing cost, let's say it's 3%. I've actually taken it a little bit higher, but let's assume it's 3%. It's an investment property, $17,400. So overall cash invested that you invest today is down payment, which is 20%. And its closing cost, so $133,400. And the loan that we have taken is in fact 580 minus 116, which is $464,000. Now let's talk about cash flow for this property because we are closing it right now. The mortgage at 6% at 30 years amortization will be 2760. Then we have condo fee, insurance, property tax, and the total monthly cost of owning this condo will be 3356. Obviously, there could be some maintenance, there could be some vacancy. I'm not taking that for simplicity right now. And right now, because the rents are so high in square one, the rents are going up to $2,800 at the minimum. I've even seen 1+1 condos go for $2,950, and I've seen 2-bedroom condos go for $3,300. So what this means is that our cash flow is roughly $550 negative, which I understand is not very ideal, but let's go through the calculation. Now let's assume that we sell this property in 2026 at the same time when we are getting the pre-construction possession in Mississauga. Assuming the value of the house goes up by 6% year on year, we are looking at a $732,000 selling price for this house. In fact, similar condos sold for $750,000 to $800,000 in the peak of the market in Jan of 2022. The outstanding balance on the mortgage is $430,000. So your $464,000 loan has been paid down to $430,000. And remember, you are not paying that down, the tenant is. Then we talk about gross of sales. So the gross of sales when you're selling the condo is, obviously I'm not including closing costs right now, but bear with me, we'll include that in a bit, is $732,000, which is the value of the house, which is what it sells for, minus $430,000, which you owe to the bank. So overall, the gross of sales will be $302,000. And then we have closing costs. Let's assume it's 5%. And that would be $36,000 roughly. And then you have the negative cash flow that we had all these years for 4 years. So let's assume $500 on average. Now with cash flow, the thing is that your mortgage will not go up. In fact, if anything, the interest rates will come down and your mortgage payments will reduce as we go towards 2026. Even if we increase the rents by about 2.5 to 3% every single year. By the way, this is a 2019 build and therefore there's no rent control on this particular condo. But let's assume a 2.5% increase. Even then you'll almost be break even on your cash flow by 2026. But let's assume a minus $500 negative cash flow every single month for 48 months, which is 4 years from 2022 or 2023 to end of 2026 when we are selling the condo, and that's another minus $24,000. Overall net of sales will be $302,000, which was gross of sales, minus closing costs, minus negative cash flow that we had for 4 years, and that's about $241,400. That's the net of sales. And now in order to get profits, obviously you invested some bit of money into this. So you invested $133,400, which was your down payment plus closing costs at the time of buying the house. Your overall profit will be $108,000, and that's a 16% CAGR. Now, instead of buying the resale, if you bought the pre-construction condo for $695,000 and you were selling it on assignment, let's assume you are selling it because it's a new condo, you're selling it for $775,000, which is more than what you would sell a resale condo. Your overall profit will be about $80,000. This is before your assignment fees that you have to pay to the builder. And we are not even including the lawyer fees, and there could be a realtor fees if you're putting this assignment on MLS. So we can see here the numbers actually don't make sense. Now you might say that, Navjot, you are actually being very optimistic about how the market is going to play in the next 4 years, but that optimism is actually applied on both the pre-construction as well as the resale in this particular example. If resale goes down, the pre-construction will also go down, and then we'll have more risks that we'll talk about in the next 4 reasons that we have on this presentation. But just from numbers point of view, the math doesn't work out. But let's talk about other risks that we have with pre-construction right now. The number 2 risk is high risk of additional costs on closing. Now we have seen in the news that there are pre-construction projects where builders are not being able to build because of high cost of labor. There have been news articles where people have been asked to pay more than $280,000 to close the house, or they just lose the house and go into litigation. There have been supply shortages, like recently there was a cement shortage which is delaying the projects and increasing the cost of goods. And then we have labor shortages which are impacting the construction sector. All this could mean 2 things. One is that there could be additional building costs and overage that is charged on your purchase price. And this is something that we need to really minutely look at in the contract, that all these overages are actually capped at a certain level. I've seen certain projects where this is not capped, and therefore the builder can actually charge up to 5% of the purchase price as closing costs, which is ridiculous. And then you also run into a risk of high cost of upgrades, because not all houses are built equally. You might need a fancier countertop, you might need fancier blinds, and all this costs money. And because the cost of labor is very high and cost of materials is so high, and there's shortage of a lot of supplies, all this becomes very expensive, and there is a very high chance that you end up paying much more than $695,000 that we talked about in the previous slide for your pre-construction just to close the property. Now let's talk about the third reason, and this reason has been in the news and people actually know about this a lot more, is risk of low appraisals on future closings. Now this in fact is a real example, and this is based in Ontario, and purchase price for this particular house was back in December 2021 was $750,000, and this is closing in December of 2022, 1 year from when it was purchased. Now 4 months before closing, we applied for the mortgage. The loan amount that we asked for was 80% of the purchase price, which is $600,000. The down payment obviously was the remaining of 20%, which is $150,000. The closing cost was $22,500, which is about 3%. It's much higher than what it was actually. I just take, conservative numbers here. So overall, the out of pocket will be $172,500. However, when the appraisal happened, the appraised value of the house, just because the market has come down, was $50,000 lower to $700,000. And because the house is worth a lot less than what it was purchased for, what happens is now the loan value remains 80%, which is $560,000, and you have to do the shortfall of $40,000. So earlier the loan was $600, you were putting a $150,000 down, and now the loan is only $560, and therefore you have to put $40,000 from your pocket, which makes after closing costs the out of pocket $40,000 more than what was expected. And this is a really big risk if you are closing a house next year or even in 2024, and we'll talk specifically about that at the end of this presentation. So that is the risk of appraisal. The fourth reason why I'm not very bullish on pre-construction is builders are running out of cash. And that's pretty obvious because the cost of borrowing has gone up. Builders usually would lend money to construct properties. Obviously you give deposit as well, but that's not the only expense that they have. They have a lot more expenses, and they borrow money, and the cost of borrowing is very high. And with the cost of labor going up and the cost of material going up, there are builders in the market which have not broken ground, and they are asking for more money, or they'll not construct the houses. And that puts investors and homeowners in a big risk. Now, even if we say that these projects are with big builders, because these big builders are not listed on the stock exchange, we have no idea how much cash they have left in their bank accounts, and therefore it's really risky even if you go with a very good project. And last reason, but not the least, our personal situation can change. There could be loss of job at the time of closing. There could be critical illness because it's 3-4 years down the line. There could be loss of life, and that's something that is really important. We'll talk about that in the next slide as well. And you might move back to the country for some personal reason, and the mortgage rules can also change overnight, and it could be applicable on the pre-construction that we have already bought but we have not closed yet. And for all these reasons, we do not have an exit strategy. Now, these particular risks are there with pre-constructions regardless of whether we are in a recession or not. But it's important to note that there are risks associated to pre-construction. So when does it make sense to buy pre-construction? In my view, right now, never. However, there are certain situations when you might look at pre-construction. For example, you're on work permit or waiting for PR and you're in Ontario and BC where there is foreign buyer tax if you buy the house right now, buy a resale house right now. So therefore, you just lock into a pre-construction that is coming in 3 to 4 years, and by that time you'll have a PR and therefore you'll not have to pay the non-resident speculation tax. The second reason why pre-construction might make sense is you need to collect down payment. You only have 5% right now. You just make the deposit on that house and then you pay 15% in a staggered form in the next 2 years, and that is pretty helpful. And the third reason is that you do not want to deal with tenants right now during a recession. Now, honestly, if you do not want to deal with tenants, then real estate is probably not for you, because eventually there will be tenants staying in the house. And if you want to build a portfolio, you'll have to deal with tenants. Now, if you're buying a pre-construction, there are certain watch outs that we need to make sure that we are aware of. Number one is that we need to buy something in a prime location so that it rents well, it doesn't cash flow negative if the interest rates are high, and the appraisal comes in at value. If you buy a property in prime location, you always have an exit and you can always sell on assignment or otherwise and get out of the property. The second most important thing is that we need to prepare for the 20% down. Now that you have 2, 3, 4 years or even 1 year to prepare before you get possession of the house, we need to make sure that we are preparing ourselves for 20% down. Now, obviously, if you are an investor, then you have to do a 20% down compulsorily. But even if you are going to live in that property, don't just think that you have to save for 5%. Always save for 20%, because if the appraisal comes in lower than what you purchase it for, you at least have an option, a buffer of about 10%. So you do the 10% down, you use the 10% that you save to fill up the gap between appraisal and the purchase price, and that way you'll still be able to close the property. Number 3, and this one is the biggest mistake that people do, is that we should never use builder's lawyer to close a property, because we need to make sure that the lawyer is working in our interest. We need to make sure that overages and development charges are capped, and we can only do that if the lawyer is working in our favor. The fourth thing, which is very important, is if you are buying a condo especially, you need to have an exit strategy and assignment clause so that you can sell the property before taking a mortgage on it in case you don't qualify at the time of closing. Next most important thing is that you need to work with seasoned builders with proven track record. Now, the general thumb rule that I'm following right now is that we need to work with builders who have been in the market since 1980s. The reason why 1980s is important is because from 1978 to 1983, we saw stagflation, which basically means that the economy was actually suffering a lot. It was going down and we still had inflation, which is very similar to what's happening today. So if there's a builder who has done well in 1980s, they were able to see through that time. Then they had 2000, then they had 2008, then they had 2014. The builder has actually seen all these ups and downs, and therefore there's a very high chance that they will be prepared for what's coming in 2023. And the next one is, if you're buying a pre-construction, make sure it's closing after 2025, because 2023 and 2024 will be very unstable because we'll be in recession. We'll just come out of recession in 2024. So we need to make sure that the possession is when the market is more stable, and that is not before 2025 and 2026. And last but not the least, and that's something that no one told us when we were buying a pre-construction, we in fact bought 2 pre-constructions before doing a term insurance. We now have a term insurance of $2 million that covers our mortgages. But it's important to note that if you're getting into a pre-construction, even if you have not closed it yet, make sure you take a term insurance, because if there is loss of life, if one of the partners lose their life before closing the house, the surviving partner's interests are covered and the mortgage is paid off. Now, this particular chart is from StatCan, which is from CMHC, and it shows how many pre-construction projects have started by quarter. So by Q3 of 2022, this is the latest numbers that we have. We don't have numbers for Q4 2022, but you'll see that there are so many houses that are under construction right now, which will come under possession in 2023 and 2024. And what that means is that there'll be opportunities where many buyers won't be able to close these houses and they will be putting it on assignment. So there could be discounted assignment sales. I've already seen that. One of my clients in BC have bought something which is highly discounted just because the original buyers were not able to close the property. And then there'll be a lot of people who will be closing these mortgages because they don't qualify privately, and then they'll want to sell quickly and they would want to cut their losses, or because of the high interest rates, they can't take negative cash flows. And that's where a lot of people who have cash can actually come in and buy real estate on discount. These are all new houses and therefore the maintenance will be very low, and there'll be a lot of opportunities in 2023 and 2024 to snag these new houses that will be on assignment. However, if you are one of those who are closing a pre-construction house in 2023, I would highly recommend that you need to know your numbers today and you need to book a call with a mortgage agent, book a call with me if you want to, and we'll make a plan so that you have a way of either closing the property or exit from the property. It's really important that we do that and we plan for 2023 and 2024 closings today. I hope you like this video. My intent is never to say that pre-constructions are bad. It's just that in 2023, it might not make sense because of all the reasons that we discussed. I tried to give as much factual information in this presentation. Do hit the like button if you like the video. Do share it with your friends who have bought pre-construction or who are thinking of buying pre-construction, and do subscribe to the channel if you have not done that already, and hit the bell icon so that you don't miss these videos going forward. मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में, तब तक के लिए बाय बाय।